What's up, Raptors fans? Welcome to the Watch Report. There is one big issue concerning the Raptors, and it is important to talk about it, and that is the bench. Now, outside of Chris Boucher, who's been starting in some games, there's been very few bright spots off of the bench, and Nick Nurse has elected to play his starters heavy minutes as well. So for today's video, I'm going to give you my 3 ideas of how the Raptors can improve their bench. So if you want to like this video, that'd be very much appreciated. If you want to hit the subscribe button, we just hit the 2,800 subscribers. So I do really appreciate all of you guys subscribing. Let's get to 2,900. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel. So for today's video, the shout out goes out to John Jaclick. So John, thank you so much for supporting this channel. To likes and comments, it's always appreciated. Now let's talk about our very first idea of how the Raptors can improve their bench. Now the first idea I have of how I believe the Raptors should improve their bench is moving some of their second round picks from the future to acquire a really good bench piece. Now I know this may not be a very popular opinion given how the Raptors have drafted and just how they have developed their players, but when you take a look at their draft picks, they don't have their second round draft pick this year, but in the following year and even years down the road, I really do believe you should move some of these draft picks and second round draft picks in particular. Now, the reason I say this is because when we talk about the Raptors' history and drafting second round draft picks, we do have to take a look at where the Raptors have drafted in the past. Now, obviously, the Raptors have, for the most part, drafted in the late 40s to the late 50s. Now, given obviously the exemption of DeAndre Daniels and Quincy Acey, Quincy Acey's had a decent NBA career, but for the most part, NBA second round draft picks do take a while to develop. But just in terms of the Raptors signing undrafted players as well, that is one thing we do need to consider. So personally speaking, the Raptors, even if they drafted a mid to late 40s draft pick, there's not a huge drop off between that pick and an undrafted player. Now, obviously, the Raptors did sign a great one in Justin Champagnie as well. But when we talk about second round draft picks, I think the Raptors roster, as it is currently constructed, we have enough young talent as it is in Delano Banton, Malachi Flynn, Justin Champagnie, David Johnson, and we obviously have guys like Precious Achiuwa as well. So I believe this roster already has enough young talent. I don't necessarily think we need to continuously add second round draft picks. They do take several years to develop as well, so we do need to keep that in mind as well. So I think this roster already has enough young talent. I think it's time to package some of those second round draft picks for a bench piece that can consistently give you good production. Now, I want to use this as an example because Yuta Watanabe, outside of Chris Boucher, has been one of our brighter spots off of the bench, who's averaging 6.4 points, 3.6 rebounds, but he doesn't necessarily excel in one specific area. And this is the question mark I have with the Raptors bench, is that they have a lot of guys that can do a little bit of everything, play good defense, score a little bit, rebound a little bit, but they just don't have a guy who can consistently do that. Now, I'm using Utah as an example, and this is not to disrespect Utah. He's a great player, but just in terms of consistency, when you take a look at his point production on the right-hand column, just down the road there, you just see he gives you 26 points one game, the next game he gives you 10 points, the next game he gives you 0 and 4 points. So I think the Raptors are better off trading for a player that can consistently give you 9, 10 points. It's better to have a player that can really do something like passing or assists rather than having a bunch of guys that can give you 4 or 5 points, that can give you 2, 3 rebounds, give you 1 steal, 1 3-pointer. So I personally believe the Raptors should go for someone who can dominate in one area and give you a lot of that. So that's my personal opinion of where I think the Raptors should look for in a trade when it comes to bench pieces. But let's talk about our idea number 2 and where I believe and how I believe the Raptors can improve. And this one may be a little bit controversial, but it starts with Nick Nurse. For whatever reason, I know we've won the championship, but to me, it just seems like Nick Nurse just does not trust his bench. And Nick Nurse, when we talk about him, I think he needs to realize we are no longer a championship roster. As painful as it may sound to him, I know he's a very competitive coach who really holds his players accountable, but he needs to trust his bench a little bit more and play their bench guys a little bit more. This thing we've seen with Nick Nurse over the last couple seasons after the championship season, I should say, is he just does not play his bench guys a lot. This season, the Raptors bench is the fewest in the NBA in 14.2 minutes per played and minutes, and even last season, they're the dead last in the NBA in minutes played in 15.9 minutes per game. Now, you could possibly say, you know what, we don't have a lot of talented guys, but just based off of my observation of what I've seen with Nick Nurse, he is very quick to pull players, especially younger players. And when we take into consideration that this is supposed to be a retooling year, isn't it better to let some of these younger players build their character, build their game through mistakes? Isn't that the whole point? When we talk about the Raptors and developing their guys, you have to let some of these guys play through their mistakes. You can't let Malachi Flynn, as bad as he has been, believe me, he's been terrible. You can't play him 3 minutes in a game and pull him out because he's made a couple mistakes. Let some of these younger guys develop and play through their mistakes. Now, I want to use this as an example because we always talk about the bench mob. And the Raptors, this is that year where we had Pascal, Fred, DeLon Wright, CJ Miles, and Jakob Poeltl off of the bench. But the Raptors ranked second in the league in minutes played. Now, that is my only complaint I have with Nick Nurse. You can question a lot of things about Nick Nurse. He's a very talented coach, but the one complaint about him I have is that he needs to trust his bench guys a little bit more. Let them play through their mistakes. This is supposed to be a retooling year. You don't want to play the starters such heavy minutes that you're going to wear them out 4 months into the season. We still have a few more months to go, and hopefully the playoffs as well. But you don't want to tear your guys. The Pascal Siakams, Fred VanVleet, we've played 3 games in 4 nights. They have consistently played 40 plus minutes in each of those 3 games, and 2 of those were back to back. So I think Nick Nurse is going to wear out his starters with how many heavy minutes he has played them. And he just needs to trust some of these guys. Let them play through their mistakes and let them grow as well. So that is my second idea of how I believe the Raptors can fix their bench. And now let's move on to our last and third idea of how I believe the Raptors can fix their bench. Now, this may be another very controversial way of fixing your bench, but we talk about the Raptors starters and them needing a legitimate starting center. Now, let's assume for a moment that the Raptors do acquire a starting center without giving up any of their 5 guys in Scottie, Pascal, Fred, OG, or Gary Trent Jr. So who moves to the bench? I have been saying this for quite some time, and I know there's a lot of fans out there that think this is not the best case or the best way of developing Scottie Barnes, but I truly believe you should move Scottie Barnes to the bench, not because he doesn't deserve to be in the starting lineup, but just because he can run that second unit. He will get more touches off of the bench. He makes players around him better. We need a facilitator off of the bench, and who better to do that than Scottie Barnes? We've seen him run with some of the bench guys. He does a great job of just getting everyone involved, and I believe he'll develop a lot more. I think fans often view moving to the bench as a demotion. I don't think that is necessarily the case right now as it goes in the starting lineup. Scottie Barnes isn't always getting the most shots or even a lot of touches in the starting lineup. I know it's not been the case the last few games, but just generally speaking, you have obviously your Pascal and Fred who are going to get their shots, and you have OG and Gary Trent Jr. as well who need their shots. So where does that leave Scottie Barnes? And I know people may suggest that you can move Gary Trent to the bench. I just think Gary Trent fits in with the starting lineup so well. When you talk about Pascal driving to the basket, guys like Fred driving to the basket, you have a good catch and 3 shooter in Gary Trent Jr. And just the amount of steals he's giving you, it really allows the Raptors starting 5 to just really run out there. That style of play that Nick Nurse has him playing for several years, I think Gary Trent just suits that. And obviously moving OG to the bench is just out of the question. So this one is probably the most controversial way of fixing the bench. I just think it makes a lot of sense to Scottie to move to the bench, get more touches. He'll develop a lot more. He'll be on ball a lot more, and he'll just facilitate and get the other players involved a lot more. So I think this is probably the cheapest way without giving up any picks, without making any big trades. But I think this is one way I believe if the Raptors and Masai Ujiri decides not to move the bench pieces or acquire more bench pieces, I think this is one of the ways I believe that the Raptors can fix their bench. What do you see with some of these ideas? Do you see something that I see? Do you think the Raptors could make some of these trades? Do you think Scottie should be moved to the bench? Do you think Nick Nurse just needs to let some of these guys play through their mistakes? Do you agree with some of my ideas and takes here? Let me know in the comment section below. And it's always great hearing from you guys. I just want to thank you guys for your continued support. And I do have a trivia question for you guys today. Now, this one should be a very fairly easy question, but how many trade deadline deals did the Raptors have last season? Is it A, 4? Is it B, 2? Is it C, 1? Or is it D, 3? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video, guys. So I just want to thank you guys once again for watching this video, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.